Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. We're going to have a wonderful program today after our July 4th break. Hope you had a great little vacation celebrating the birth of America and saw some good fireworks. It being on Tuesday, I saw a lot of fireworks Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And I'm sure my good friend Marty Winkle saw plenty of fireworks. Hello, Marty. Glad that we're back in the saddle today on Stay Curious.
Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
We're doing good. I got Mars behind us here. Not the great southwest of America, but the planet Mars here, seen by our latest new SUV-sized rover, Perseverance, and we're going to be talking about some of the rovers on Mars, as this is an important date in history when the first wheels on Mars set down in 1997. So we're going to refresh your memory about that and all the hubbub that was going on that melted down the internet 26 years ago, 27 years ago. And we got a couple astronaut birthdays that happened over the July 4th holiday. And what else we've got? We're going to kick off the Shuttles of July here, Marty. So glad that you're all with us. Hope that you all had a wonderful celebration of America's birthday. Weather was iffy some places, but super hot down here in Florida. And we're hitting almost 100 degrees here, and well over 100 with the feels like temperature. But a beautiful thing over the weekend, Marty, was a celebration at the Reagan Library in California, where Sally Ride's statue was dedicated there. The same statue that's at the Cradle of Aviation on Long Island. And there you see, looking lovingly up at their daughter and sister, is Sally Ride's 99-year-old mother and her big sister there attended the ceremonies. So that was quite a neat celebration there at the Reagan compound in California. And we've got our happy birthdays here to celebrate. We've got two women that were born on July 2nd. Linda Godwin was turned 70. How old did Linda turn? 71 years old. And she was born July 20th. Well, there's Linda. And Wendy Lawrence is the other one that shares the birth date. But first, let's look at Linda. Maxine Goodman was born July 2nd, 1952 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And she had 4 space flights, logging over 38 days in space. And she later segued into being the Director of Exploration and Flight Crew Operations at Johnson Space Center. And right now she's a professor emeritus at the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Missouri. So she went back to her hometown roots of Cape Girardeau, Missouri there. And but she was 4 space flights, 38 days in space, including 2 EVA spacewalks there. And Wendy Lawrence, what's her full name there? She's born in Jacksonville, Florida. I can tell you that. Wendy Barron Lawrence on July 2nd, 1959. So happy 64 to you, Wendy. We have met her several times out at the Space Center, Marty. What a delightful guest she is. As you see, her name tag says too short on her flight suit there. Indeed, she was too short to wear a Russian Orlan spacesuit, and therefore she didn't get to stay at the Mir space station, and David Wolf did. But she trained for all of that. Twice she'd been to the Mir space station, and she told me personally when I asked her for autograph that I said, the first time she was there, they needed to clean up the place. And second time she was there, she said it was just, everything was still where it was. They just moved equipment out of the way that, of course, they couldn't get into the progress to have them burn up. But she's always an interesting talk out there, and her good friend is, of course, Nick Thomas, the astronaut wrangler out there. And Wendy, I know that you watch Stay Curious when Nick is on there, and we celebrate your birthday. Nick said he'll be back, Marty. I think Monday the 17th, we're going to do a program on Apollo 11 and the Gemini flight this month, which I forget which one it is. But, Nick, I was always wanting to talk about those Gemini astronauts, and I am too. So we'll have a Stay Curious with Nick Thomas here on Monday, the 17th of July. Well, next up on our birthdays, his real birthday's today, and that's Tom Hendricks. Not Hendricks, Hendricks, no D in that. And he was born on July 5th, 1952, in Bryan, Ohio, but considers Woodville, Ohio to be his hometown. Woodville's not too far from my hometown of Findlay, Ohio. Woodville's over by Sandusky and Cedar Point, where I grew up south of Toledo, but he's on the edge there, northwest Ohio. Henrik was an Air Force colonel, had 4 missions, twice as a pilot and twice as a commander. And he commanded the all-Ohio crew, STS-70, that all the members were Buckeyes on board. One was made an honorary Buckeye. We'll talk about that later this month on our Shuttles of the Month, because that woodpecker, we call it the Woodpecker Flight STS-70, Marty, because woodpeckers attacked the external tank. And then coincidentally, the astronauts were all Buckeyes. And we had Don Thomas wrote a book about that. And Don is becoming a friend of our museum, as he's frequently out there at the Kennedy Visitors Complex. There's a beautiful barn. Well, what better barn sighting could you want than that? So their hometown hero there on a barn in Woodville, Ohio. Happy birthday to you, Tom Hendricks. He is 71 years old today. All right, the shuttles of July. 11 beautiful shuttles, 68 crewmen, 15 were women. All right, we'll get into some details about that, but launched on July 1st, 1997 was STS-94. And that was the follow-up, that was the continuation of the aborted mission of STS-83 that was flown in April 97, actually launched in April 97, all right, but a fuel cell problem, one of them fuel cells went down, so they brought him back after 2 days on what was to be a like a 12-day mission, and flew him 3 months later. This exact April, May, June, July. Yep, 3 months later, the quickest that a crew has gone to space and gone back. So all these astronauts quickly got 2 ticks off of their chart of how many times they've been to space. They kept the same. STS 83 was just turned blue. All right, from red to blue. The same crew, the same Space Lab mission on there that was a big success, MSL-1 on there, big medical science stuff going on there and that sort of thing. It marked the progress on how to control liquid drops, would lead to improvements in chemical manufacturing, in petroleum technology, cosmetics, and food industry because of this mission. Over 100 tests, 700 crystals of proteins were done on this thing. A very ambitious mission. But the only mission launched on July 4th was STS-121 on July 4th, 2003. And our good friend Carlton Bailey was there. And Carlton did the walkout there of this mission. It was a hard hat mission with some science. But they had 3 EVAs during this to work on the fledgling International Space Station. There's the beautiful launch on July 4th, 2006. An afternoon launch at 2:37. And Carlton nailed that with his long lens there. Beautiful shot there. You see the SSME flames coming out of them. Perfect little diamonds out of those exhaust cones there, and the solid rocket boosters blasting away, doing all the heavy lifting up there. So STS-121 was a 12-day, almost 13-day mission up there, and they completed all their goals on there. As we remember, the shuttles of the month of July, but an anomaly of STS-121 was that it was a year after the previous return to flight of STS-114. I know the numbers are out of whack, but 121 followed 114 a year later. Now, 114 was after the 2-year downtime after the Challenger disaster, where foam from the external tank hit the wing and punched a hole in the edge of it and doomed the crew. Well, the same thing happened at the launch of 114. They had plenty of foam coming off the external tank, and it concerned them so much that they technically grounded the shuttle for the next 90 days until they flew this mission of 121. I mean, not 90 days, for 12 months. It was officially grounded because of the anomalies of the foam hitting it. And then a year later, they decided, well, can't do much about it, so we'll launch them anyway, I guess. And this had the extended boom on it, just like 114 did, and some other safety measures that were 114 couldn't get them all in. So over 114 and 121, they did a lot of different things a new way for the safety of the crew to avoid what happened to the Columbia crew of STS-107. So yeah, you had 107, then 114, and 121 in order like that, three in order. So these would get out of position because of the payloads and just various things. You had to keep the same numbers for the technicians and workers like Marty, our producer here on Stay Curious, worked on the Space Shuttle main engines. But so as we look at the shuttle, and we'll get into the shuttles of July, we want to turn the page and have you look up at the sky tonight. And if it's nice and clear where you're living, you're going to see Venus. It'll be the brightest star in the west after sunset. And right next to it, there'll be two bright stars above and to the left of Venus. One is reddish, that's the planet Mars. The other will have a kind of a golden glow to it. That's the star Regulus, the bright star of Leo the Lion. Now, Leo the Lion is of course, an astrological constellation where the planets, moon, and sun are found in. So Venus and Mars being in Leo the Lion would have some significance 1,000 years ago to Zoroastrian priest astrologers, maybe, that were predicting horoscopes for their king. Marty, you have something?
Yeah, that's Mars you're talking about.
That's Mars right there.
Okay, I thought you said it was Venus.
No, that's the planet Mars,
Right.
And it's near the planet Venus tonight. I don't have a picture of Venus, could have thrown one up there, but Venus is actually looking like a crescent moon through binoculars. You'll barely see that Mars is a disk in binoculars or even a telescope because it's over 200 million miles away from Earth. Now think about that. And if we put people on there, Mars' orbit every 2 years comes as close to Earth as 40 million miles, but most of the time it's in the 100 to 200 million miles away from us. Excuse me. And that's going to be a time delay of up to 20 minutes to talk to someone on Mars. And what's going to be happening in the next month, Marty, is Mars is going to be going behind the sun, and communications is going to be terminated from Mars. For at least almost 2 weeks, we can't talk to these spacecraft orbiting Mars because the sun is blocking it in the way until it pops up in the morning sky here at the end of August. Then the communications will happen. So there'll be actually times where we can't talk to humans because on Mars we can't talk to some of the spacecraft on Mars because we don't have any relay satellites to send the signal somewhere and then away from the sun. So it's a real something to be considered about. Well, as we look at Mars, we're going to talk about, on this day in history, this little rover that could, Sojourner, was the first wheels on Mars, all right? 24 years ago, the spacecraft Pathfinder landed, and it was in a series, a big medicine ball inflated around the spacecraft. And when it came through re-entry, the heat shield was the re-entry. The heat shield kept the vehicle safe during that. Then the heat shield fell off, and then these giant medicine balls inflated. And there you see it right there at my hand there, where it bounced about 20 times on Mars, finally landed. It was counterweighted so it would land and be upright. And there you see the ramp that this little rover, the size of a microwave oven, the first wheels on any world outside of the Earth. On July 4th, the whole thing landed, and a few days later, Sojourner, the size of a microwave, touched the surface of Mars. And this robot is very important to the plot of the 2015 Hollywood blockbuster movie, The Martian, as Mars-stranded astronaut Mark Watney walked to this following the Twin Peaks of Mars that this photo that the station had photographed, and the station had its own weather station and indicators and so forth on it. And I'm going to tell you what we renamed that station in just a minute. But the rover was named Sojourner Truth after an American abolitionist and women's rights activist. Truth was born into slavery in Swarthmore, New York, but escaped with her infant daughter to freedom in 1826. After going to court to recover her son in 1828, she became the first black woman to win a case against a white man. And there was a contest in 1996 to name the Mars Pathfinder rover, and 12-year-old Valerie Ambrose of Bridgeport, Connecticut, won a year-long worldwide competition and named it Sojourner, Truth. And Sojourner is the name that stuck. And in 1997, NASA was honoring diversity, 26 years ago. And that's very interesting, I think, to think about. 3 decades that NASA's been wanting to be diverse and inclusive and so forth. And, of course, that's a big, prominent, good thing that's happening in our country today. So the name Sojourner worked. Planned to last 30 days in the cold Antarctic-like Martian atmosphere, the batteries in the systems lasted 84 days on this little rover. Okay, and I'll bet Sojourner Truth, of course, she never saw cars drive on anywhere in the 1820s, but her name bears an action-packed Hot Wheels rover there. That's quite a sought-after little space geek thing. So now, there it is. This is not a true photograph. This is Sojourner is actually in the upper left next to a rock that it's actually kissing to get a chemical reading on that rock. That is the ramp on the left that you see, and the airbags deployed. The pedals are the what became known as the Carl Sagan Memorial Station, a meteorological station that operated for a couple years before they turned it off. And there is the landscape of the Mars landing area, and in the back are the Twin Peaks that they called those features in the back there. A photograph taken by a camera on the Carl Sagan Memorial Station. And there is Carl Sagan next to the Viking lander that in 1976 NASA landed 2 unmanned spacecraft. There's the size of them, identical. They did not have wheels on them. They had pads, but they were quite heavy, and as you can see, quite an amazing feat to bundle all that up in a nose cone, and it was launched from Kennedy Space Center in 1975, and then they landed in 1976. Carl Sagan was the popularizer of astronomy and all things space on the PBS acclaimed Cosmos series. This is the 1970s. He appeared just dozens of times on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, talking about NASA's ambitions to go to Mars and beyond. So we still want to honor Carl Sagan, that his station is still there, though it's not working. Been shut off a long time ago, but those Viking spacecraft took pictures like this of the Mars landscape, and you kind of get the impression that there's rocks everywhere. Everywhere you look are real bundles of rocks, all right? And some of those rocks were covered with the frost over the Utopia Plains where Viking 2 landed in September. So some stunning artwork and photos we've had of Mars for over 30 years. Now, both these space stations lasted about 2 years and then were shut off on there, the Viking ones. And to look at our NASA evolution of rovers on Mars, you've got the little Sojourner there in the left-hand corner. All right, weighed about 8 pounds, something like that. Mars Phoenix lander there in the middle did not have wheels on it, but it is just now been declared not operational as its solar panels have been covered by the fine dust that settles on Mars. And but it did a lot of science, particularly on earthquakes on Mars and what the Mars is made of as it dug into Mars like a well.
Moonquakes.
Pardon me?
Moonquakes.
Yes, moonquakes.
Yeah, Marsquakes.
Yeah, Marsquakes on Mars. Yes, they registered Marsquakes. Mars has got a small molten core, but nothing like the Earth's. And then you got the Mars Exploration Rovers. That was the technical name, MER, for the Opportunity and Spirit. Spirit lasted about 6 years. Opportunity lasted over 12 years. Solar paneled. They were guaranteed to last for 90 days. Guess what? Little dust devil twisters on Mars cleared off those panels unexpectedly, and they lasted well beyond their 3-month life cycle. And this did some amazing things and taught NASA engineers at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, how to navigate on Mars with a lot of artificial intelligence that's built into cars now. I know your car, Marty's got some intelligence that you drift over in the lane, your steering wheel jiggles or noise goes off to warn you that you're getting out of your lane. That sort of things on our roads today are pioneered by the Mars Exploration Rover up there in the upper left. And then you've got the Mars Science Laboratory, Perseverance, and Curiosity. They're the size of an SUV. We're going to talk more about Curiosity, who's been ignored. Curiosity's coming up on 12 years on Mars, and it's been climbing up a mountain, Mount Sharp, and we're going to show you a dramatic picture of that here in a minute. But the money, the taxpayer money involved, Marty, show me the money. Well, that little Sojourner, all right, and Pathfinder cost $265 million in 1997. So with inflation, that's probably like $500,000 today. The 2 golf cart sized rovers were each $400 million apiece, all right, when they were designed and built in 2000. And then the SUV side rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, those are a cool $2 billion with a B billion-dollar little remote robots for Earthlings there on Mars. So, thought I'd just show you the relative wheel sizes from Sojourner to Opportunity to Curiosity. Curiosity does weigh almost a ton on the surface, and as well as Perseverance. And Curiosity experienced a lot of breakage in its wheels. They're like aluminum alloy, all right, because the rocks are so hard and stuff, start breaking up that tread. And so Perseverance was set with a little bit hardier wheels. But still, there's some degrading going on as these rovers go across the surface. And they crawl across the surface, Marty. They don't drive across the surface like many people think. They're Jet Propulsion Lab scientists there giving you a great ratio of the size of these things. You would barely put, if you just, they're just crawling across the surface, yet like a football field length, 300 feet in one day, maybe 8 hours to go 300 feet. So they literally are just barely turning those wheels. They're not rolling across the surface of Mars. They are turning those wheels ever so slightly all right, because they don't want something to happen. They're going too fast and they can't stop. So that'll take humans and a gas pedal for us to be on Mars to go as fast as we want to go. But still, it's pretty impressive as you keep the steady pressure on just going like 2 feet an hour type of thing. Yeah, if you're going 300 feet in a day, an 8-hour day, you could do the math. And so, but it's not very fast that you're going. Yet you're still covering some ground and you're always stopping. The Perseverance, its difference between Curiosity is that it is harvesting and putting in test tubes samples that could contain life, they hope, and hopefully those samples will be picked up within the next 10 years by another Mars rover that still hasn't come off the drawing boards yet. Don't have the money to pick up those test tubes that Perseverance has been laying down lately, but somebody will pick them up someday. But that's the idea, is to bring back the first Martian samples automatically by another rover that's going to go to where Perseverance is. So, all right, let's get to, cannot forget that there's another rover on Mars that's active. At least we think it's probably shut down. Yep, that's the red Chinese flag on their rover. It took a selfie of itself by setting down a GoPro type, and that was over 2 years ago. And there's the platform that it landed on. So they copied our method of landing on a platform and then roving off, and then we figured out how to land them without a platform and wheels up. And of course, all these rovers go by their pieces and parts that they left on Mars. It's quite littered now with a lot of human trash. That's the parachute and the back shell of re-entry that the Chinese rover Zhurong went and checked out one day. And there you can see the antenna and the solar panels. But it hasn't moved in 4 or 5 months, according to the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The American orbiter has been in service over 12 years. So they think it's either, it's obviously not moving, so it could be broke down or just ran out of power on there. So first wheels up there on Mars. We got Chinese up there. And here is that is Curiosity, actually, not Perseverance. That's Curiosity after 12 years on the surface. Marty, you can even see on this wheel right there, you see a hole in that wheel right there. Not been so much battered by the weather as it has by the harsh Mars environment, where we've told you before, the Mars atmosphere can sustain some dust devils and clouds, but it is so thin that if it was 50 degrees at your feet, at the top of your head, it's going to be freezing below zero. All right. There's no thin insulation there. And Mars is basically, think Antarctica. It is cold. It is below zero most of the time. All right, except the rocks can warm up. But once again, like I said, 6 feet up, it's going to be below zero, even if the rocks are 50 degrees on there. So is the thin atmosphere. So Curiosity has been just a phenomenal machine on Mars. It landed, like Perseverance did, in an area where we were sure that Mars was once drenched with water. In the 4.5 billion year history of Mars, we think that its first billion years after the core settled down and so forth, that it had water long before Earth did, and that its surface was covered with a lot of water. And we have seen this in evidence of striated features where sedimentary layers have been set down. We have seen it, just all the evidence chemical of this was drenched. This crater, Gale Crater, was drenched in water. So we landed there with Curiosity, and it landed in the blue ellipse, and it's been scaling up Mount Sharp there inside Gale Crater for the last 12 years, and it's almost at the peak. And this is what it looks like from up there. Spectacular. Look at that Martian vista from about 1.5 miles up high, and you're looking down over the plains that this rover came from. All right, you see the striated layers in the background. That is sedimentary layers. That's the only way you can get that. And then it just looks like the Gobi Desert or southwest Arizona or New Mexico. And yet the red is everywhere. The red is a covering like dust from these volcanoes. Mars has giant volcanoes on one side of it. Several of them are over 3 or 4 miles high. One is 13 miles high. They dwarf Mount Everest. A couple of them are over 8 miles high. And in somewhere in Mars history, these belching volcanoes, all of that iron that was belching out landed like in dust on the surface and iodized by the water in the atmosphere there and changed to rust. That's why Mars is red everywhere you look. Well, what we want to celebrate about Mars is Perseverance. There it is inside the Jet Propulsion Lab. I like showing these pictures with the humans around it because that vehicle, how cool it'd be to be one of them humans in the bunny suit, and then you're looking at this selfie of Perseverance that you were just laying underneath 2 years ago. Well, there is another selfie. They do these by taking like 100 pictures and putting them all together. So that's how they get the arm out of the way in there. And in the middle to the left there, you see a little helicopter, a little black spot there. That's the helicopter Ingenuity. And we're glad that Tom Celentano's enjoying this. Steve Hammer's watching, Chalid Zan. Gary Gerald, good to see you, Gary Gerald. I guarantee you that Terry White went home with some of your Vidalia onions there, Gary. And we had Terry White, the Orbital Processing Facility manager, on the other day. Mikey Haddad, I hope you had a good vacation. I saw some of those Cape Cocoa Beach fireworks over the weekend. Bet you did too. Ron Roberts is watching. Carlton Bailey, thank you for letting us share your excellent photography, Carlton. There's Pam Shivik. She's a Buckeye. She knows where she grew up there near that town of our astronaut, Wellington. Where is it there? Let me get that. Was that Hendrick was from. Hendrick was from Woodville, yes. I know that Pam Shivik's not too far from Woodville because that's where Lorraine is from, up there near Lake Erie. And Melissa Pope's watching. Hey, Melissa. Dave Stange, he probably went through withdrawals 3 days without Stay Curious. Glad some of you did. Cynthia Rossi, Bill Whiting, and Doug Forrest. Hope to see Bill out at the Space Center. I'll be out there Friday, Bill. And Doug Forrest, good to see you, young man. We're talking about Pasadena and Jet Propulsion Lab. And Doug he said he's sitting about 10 miles from Pasadena doing his thing there. And he's a graphics designer, but he does these wonderful pencil drawings of things there. So glad that you've all found us today on Stay Curious after a long weekend. We want to feature a little bit about the story over the weekend was that NASA engineers are prepping the miniature Mars helicopter Ingenuity for its 53rd flight across the surface of the planet following a 2-month radio blackout. Well, the silence was due to a Mars hill blocking the rover because it's been trucking ahead of flying, actually, not trucking, flying ahead of Perseverance and kind of scouting things for it. There it is, 4 pounds, $26 million of technology there with huge rotor blades that go in opposite direction, thousands of RPMs to get it lifted up and flying. All right, it's solar powered. The solar power is not getting covered up. Obviously, the speed of the wind's blowing that off. That little box is all the electronics and a little GoPro type camera in it that's been taking pictures and actually looking at places that Jet Propulsion Lab Mars scientists are looking at and saying, well, instead of going there, let's have Percy go over here in this direction because Jeannie, they call her, has found something quite interesting. That power loss, though, 6 months, 2 months without hearing from it, they were a little bit on their edge, but that was after its 52nd flight. All right. And the portion of Jezero Crater, the rover and helicopter are currently exploring, has a lot of rugged terrain, which makes communication dropouts more likely, but they're going to some of these honey holes there that they know were standing water where there could be not microbes left, but maybe fossils of microbes when they dig deep. So Its first flight was in April 2021, 2 months after Perseverance landed at Jezero Crater. And it works like this. It roves ahead, takes off. It flies for about 2 minutes. Its last flight was 139 seconds. Okay, so 120 seconds is 2 minutes. Goes about 1,000 feet. All right, and about 30 or 40 feet up in the air. And this is quite extraordinary. It has already been doing what scientists are calling completely outside the box of accomplishments. To accomplish what it's done in the thin Martian atmosphere and creating the lift necessary really gives planetary scientists something to think about on future missions, because now we can fly over planet Mars and not have to worry about the wheels getting chewed up or going so slow because of the artificial intelligence. You don't want to get too ahead of it. But this is an extremely successful, and make no doubt about it, catching a lot of attention at future ways to not just explore Mars, but on other planets as well that have atmospheres. Well, Marty, this is the background that you chose today, and it certainly was a good one. And that little yellow is where Ingenuity is actually flying in this incredible vista, showing you millions of years are involved here in these layers of Mars. And in those layers could be shells, could be of creatures that once lived on Mars. We're not finding things on the surface of Mars because it is baked like a microwave oven by the radiation of the sun. There's no ozone layer to stop those harmful ultraviolet and X-rays from reaching the surface of the Earth. So UV radiation is just frying everything like you would to sterilize something here on Earth with ultraviolet radiation. So we're not finding anything on the surface, and any of the bones or anything that could be there from any creatures have long ago dissolved on the surface. But it's digging down. And I told you about the volcanoes of Mars. Volcanoes mean caves. So I say we're going to find life in caves on Mars, all right? I'm pretty convinced about it, Marty. Well, one last picture to show you here to get you outside in your backyard today, and you don't have to worry about, well, I'm sure someone will be shooting off firecrackers still today, but you're going to see Venus, Mars, and the star Regulus, the bright star of Leo the Lion, all in a line tonight for the next couple nights. And Venus is going to be hanging in there and staying where it's at, but Mars and Regulus are going to dip down below the horizon. And like I said, Mars is going to be so close to the sun, we won't be able to have communications with Perseverance, Curiosity, and Ingenuity on Mars. And I'll tell you when that happens. I think it's going to happen in about 2 weeks, and then we'll have about 2 weeks of blackout, and then we'll be back to it. But go out there and get you some starlight tonight. The moon is in the after midnight scene after a spectacular full moon over the weekend. Hope everybody got a little bit of moonshine, and I certainly did. Got almost 3 nights in a row watching that moon come up over the Atlantic Ocean. A lot of fun to do that. Of course, the day I was going to photograph it, my camera batteries were dead, so depending on that cell phone, way too much for pictures, and not a good professional camera. But so we hope that y'all enjoyed a little bit of Mars, a couple of birthdays, and where to look up in the sky to keep you interested today. And Marty and I will be back on Thursday and Friday. We're working on a new company for Future Friday. If not, we'll feature something in the future on Friday. And Thursday, let's talk about those shuttles of the month of July a little bit more, as we had some real amazing missions, including the last mission of the entire shuttle program. STS-135 was launched on July 11th, or was launched in 2011. The exact date it was launched was that's July 8th. So we'll be celebrating that too. So, Marty, we had a good Streamlabs job today. Took us. We were a little bit rusty getting out of the chute here today, but I think we'll be fine the rest of the week, and we know that you will be. Now that you got your fix of Stay Curious. So thank you everybody for watching. Please book your vacations this summer and fall down here at the American Space Museum, where we can see you personally. Until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.